the Coda story, the trilogy, and it said the ships of EZRI DAX and Cisco and Picard and Riker, the Titan, of course, all have to combine to do this big thing that we're talking about. And obviously, the first things we hear are, wait, EZRI Captain and Cisco Captain? What have we missed?
Hold on one second.
Well, a lot if you're just coming back into the novels now. Again, this is the end of 20 years of work.
Right.
But essentially what happened with EZRI was back in the Destiny trilogy, which came out in 2008. Essentially, we jumped forward. And the reason this jump forward occurred at that particular time was that we wanted to have this great epic trilogy that was going to come out at the end of 2008, around the time that originally we thought the new Star Trek movie was going to hit. This was before we knew it was going to be delayed until May of 2009. But we were told you can use TNG, DS9, and you can use Enterprise, but you can't use Voyager really because Kirsten Beyer has called dibs, and you can't use anything 23rd century. You can't use TOS or anything like that because we don't know what Abrams is going to do, so we have to go hands off on that century. But given what we had to work with, and they said we want something epic, I came up with the Borg Invasion, which is they've given up on assimilating us. After Janeway blew up their transwarp hub and put a massive section of their transwarp network into dust, that's the point where the Borg just kind of go, yeah, you're not worth assimilating. We're just going to wipe you out. You've become a pest. You're an infestation. We're done with you. Now we're going to kill you. And they don't come looking to bargain. They're not here to assimilate. They're not here to talk. They're not here to take anything. They're just here to eliminate everything in their path. And they don't, like, before they send one cube, maybe a couple of cubes, those were incidents. Those were minor skirmishes. By the time this thing gets into full swing, the Borg send approximately 7,200 odd cubes into Federation space, and they lay waste to everything in their path. They destroy entire star systems. They blow planets off the map. By the time it's done, 63 billion people are dead. Everything in 100 light-year radius around the Azure Nebula, which, as it turns out, is their entry point for a number of reasons that are explained in the story, everything within 100 light years of that is essentially a dead zone. They've wiped out everything. So there's this massive patch of just dead worlds. And what happens is that during this period of time, EZRI had basically been progressing in the DS9 novels from around 2001 through around 2006. She'd been saying, once she embraced her Trill nature, she was like, I can be more than this. I don't have to just be a counselor. I have multiple lifetimes, hundreds of years of experience. I can be so much more than this. So she changes over to command track. Becomes a command officer, a junior lieutenant. And what happens is she gets transferred to a ship, the Aventine, which is one of these new slipstream starships that are being built with tech that Voyager brought back. She's second officer, I think, so third in command. And in an engagement with the Borg, Captain, XO, and a bunch of other officers, all dead, taken out in one shot. Suddenly, Lieutenant Dax, 26, 27 years old, is ranking officer on the bridge. What choice does she have? She has to take command. Gets the ship out of danger, yada, 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 does what she does. At this point, now the Borg invasion is underway, and Starfleet has a shortage of ships, shortage of captains, casualties are mounting. So what do they say to her? They say, congratulations, you're captain now. You're promoted, pick an XO, and get back in the fight. Go back to work. And basically, she becomes captain the same way Picard became captain. Picard got to be captain at 27 on the Stargazer when his captain and XO were killed. And Lieutenant Picard took command of the bridge. So Picard understands in Destiny what young EZRI is doing. He's become this elder statesman of a captain. Now she's the young maverick. She's the young hothead. But she's also got hundreds of years of experience. So she's not a kid. She's not stupid. She's just a Dax. And as you remember, we were told, Daxes don't always think. Sometimes they just do. And that's EZRI as a captain. Sometimes she just does. So that's how she becomes captain of Aventine. That happens during the Borg invasion. There was a whole storyline in the post-DS9 novels about Sisko's return. from his time with the Prophets. They started hinting at it in 2001 with the Avatar books by S.D. Perry. And I think he finally returns in the novel Unity about 4 or 5 years later. And I think there's maybe a dozen novels in the DS9 continuity between those 2 points. But eventually he does return. And there's a whole storyline that follows that. And there's storylines in the Gamma Quadrant and some species called the Ascendants and yada, yada, yada. And I wrote one of those books, which was called Warpath, and that involves Kira having visions after she's critically wounded, and she learns that she's something called the Hand of the Prophets. So she's got some role to play that is apparently on a par with the Emissary. The Emissary is the message of the Prophets. He's the word. She is the action. He's the messenger. She's the boots on the ground. And so they realize that Kira is just as important to the faith as Sisko is. And within, I think, a couple of novels after that, she leaves military service and becomes a Vedic and starts novitiate training and basically joins the religious side of Bajor. And she becomes a religious figure, which is where she is by the time we catch up with her in Coda.
Oh, Nana's got to hear this stuff.
Yeah.
She would probably love that. And it's interesting because, again, I think the producers, when they were talking about their season 8 plan, they also had this notion of Kira becoming a Vedic. It's like, so again, by just sheer chance, we hit on the same thing. And this was years ago. This happened back on the writing side back in 2008, 2009. So, I mean, it's not like we had any insight into their plans. We just looked at the same set of starting assumptions and then hit upon some of the same ideas.
Well, it's Star Trek Online. She's a Vedic as well.
Yeah. I mean, again, there are some things where the online guys said, that's a good idea. We can use that. And they've adopted some of the ships that we, developed for the books. They've brought them over to the online side. Like, so the Aventine, which is a ship that I made up for Destiny, for DAX, eventually, it was designed, a designer put together a mock-up and a wireframe. It got incorporated into Star Trek Online, and now the Eagle Moss guys who do the little miniatures, they sell little Aventine starship miniatures. So even though it's never been on TV, there's little there's little Eagle Moss miniatures of the Aventine.
Nice.
Love that title, The Hand of the Prophet, though. It reminds me of Game of Thrones. I want
Me too.
to have a little pin there on her. I'm sure.
Yeah. This was also, I'd never read the George R. R. Martin books, and this was years before Game of Thrones was on TV. So again, it's just one of those coincidences.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. These people are copying you, man.
Well, you say that. I look at, I wrote Star Trek Section 31 Control about a malevolent artificial intelligence called Control that runs Section 31 and has for centuries. And then Kirsten Beyer mentions it to the writer's room, and then suddenly, what's season 2 of Discovery? It's about a malevolent AI named Control that runs Section 31. And I'm like, where's my check, people? Yeah. I mean, I know I'm actually not entitled to a check. It's all work for hire. I don't own the copyright. But, a thank you credit might have been nice. A T-shirt. Yeah. They could have sent me a T-shirt.
T-shirt. You just got to email them your sizes, see what happens.
I got the honorary art department T-shirt in season 1. It would have been nice to get something for season 2.
Oh, that's cool. Please be on a mailing list.
I created Control, and all I got was a lousy T-shirt.
Yes, that would be acceptable. I could live with that.
Janet Jackson has that shirt too.
Oh,
there you go. David, I have a quick question about the novels. Out of all the novels that you've written to this point, which one of them would you like to see turned into a film?
It's hard to say. I mean, of my original novels, or are you talking about the Star Trek novels?
The Star Trek novels. The Star Trek novels.
I've written 29 Star Trek novels up to this point. I actually, at one point, a couple of years ago, I was in like a big phone creative meeting with Kurtzman and their people. I actually tried to pitch them on the Destiny trilogy, which is the Borg Invasion one. It's a big sort of multi-crossover event. And at the time, they were trying to figure out how to bring Stewart back into the fold. And he had said in a Variety interview he wanted to do something big, something epic. So I pitched them that. And that was originally how that sort of ball started rolling. And we actually went through a whole bunch of rounds of back and forth and outlines and beat sheets and trying to figure out how to adapt the story. And eventually it just never gelled. It just didn't come together. And eventually also Stuart didn't want to do it, which is, why the project went in a different way. But I mean, I would still love to see it adapted, maybe as, sort of like Marvel did their What If series.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be kind of cool to see, Star Trek Myriad Universes, and sort of do a whole animated miniseries, like do a nice Prodigy level computer animation miniseries, get the actors back to do the voices, but that way they can still look youthful and energetic and not all squidgy. And that would be kind of fun. But if not, I don't really so much see my work as adapting to movies. It's more suited to a TV adaptation. The one I'd really love to see come to life is the Star Trek Vanguard books. It was a series I co-developed with editor Marco Palmieri. It started coming out in 2005. It's set during the original series era, so the time of the original Star Trek, Kirk and Spock and that whole era. And it's, it's sort of grittier. It's a little more realpolitik kind of based. It's based around a starbase called Starbase 47, aka Starbase Vanguard. There's this whole top secret operation. It turns out as you go through the saga, you realize it's the secret origins of where Project Genesis actually came from. But you also learn like the secret origin of the Tholians, and why the Tholians to this day are still so angry at the Federation. Where did all that animosity come from? It's just this big sweeping epic. It's 8 books. I wrote every other book. My friends Dayton Ward and Kevin Dillmore wrote the alternating books. And that just sort of, again, that's a quirk of how that happened. We ended up working really well as a team, alternating back and forth. But I still think to this day that would be a fantastic, 3-season Star Trek TV series. And it could dovetail perfectly into Strange New Worlds. So I would love to see Strange New Worlds be the handoff or the kickoff for Star Trek Vanguard, the TV series.
David, you mentioned earlier on that your future books are going to be focused or are going to be fitting around, say, Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Picard, things like that.
Well, I don't even know if I'm going to have any future books. I have nothing under contract. I just know that they're not going to give up doing Star Trek novels, and I have a sense that the remit in the future will be that the books will be more closely aligned with the new TV shows.
Gotcha.
Whether I'll get to write any of them, I have no idea. Nobody's called.
Probably.
Do you think the new books? Do you think the new books would ever leverage Lower Decks, would Rutherford or Tendi?
Well, I mean, we snuck some references to Lower Decks into the Coda trilogy. There's references to a character named Teresa Chen talking about the importance of second contact. There's a reference to a California class starship. So we snuck in little jokes, and I think there's also James Swallow was very close. He was going to put in a joke regarding Miles O'Brien as he embarks on some near suicide mission thing, saying, if I don't make it back from this, tell them I want them to build a statue of me. But he decided that was a little too on the nose. He couldn't go there.
That's funny.
But we got some references in there, and I got a very sly sort of half nod to Prodigy into Oblivion's Gate. And it's funny because in my Mirror Universe books that I wrote years ago, I happened to have a Tellarite character whose last name was Pog. And then they've got Jankum Pog going on Prodigy. So I have Lieutenant Pog in some of the Mirror Universe sequences of Oblivion's Gate. It's not necessarily supposed to be a nod to Prodigy, but maybe it kind of is. We don't know. Could be.
Maybe on Tellar, that's like Jones.
Yeah, maybe Jones. Could be a cousin.
It's a Smith.
Maybe this is who he could have been if he'd been not kidnapped into the Delta Quadrant or something.
Mm-hmm.
So we've acknowledged them. Whether or not those series are going to lend themselves to novels, hard to say. Much like the other new series, their continuity is very tight. There's not a lot of empty spaces between the episodes where you can sneak in another story of novel-length complexity. Mm-hmm. Maybe between seasons, if they do long time jumps, maybe we can work something in there. There might be prequel stories that are worth telling, depending on how the backstory rolls out over the next 20 episodes or so. I think Lower Decks, if I had to guess, and I don't know this for sure, if I had to guess, I would say it'll lend itself better to comic books. I think it is a natural fit for IDW. It's all they got to do is get the right writer on it with the right sense of humor, get an artist who can pick up that style, and boom, that thing is gold. I think that'll look great.
Trading cards.
Trading cards, sure. And Prodigy, same thing. I think it's tailor-made for short little vignettes of comic book length, 22-page stories or even less, maybe 16 or 12-page stories that could theoretically happen between episodes. But as for novels, it'd be really hard. It'd be really hard just because their continuity is so tightly put together. They don't really leave a lot of room to sneak new stuff in.
It would be really fun to see how Mariner ended up on the Cerritos. Like, been so many places. That would be fun comic books. Her stint on DS9 and her stint with other people.
She's going to be
Mariner,
everywhere.
the early years. You can get like a whole
early
year
years
of issues out of Mariner, the early years.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of Lower Decks and Prodigy, David, we really hope to have you back sometime soon so that you can talk to us about Lower Decks and Prodigy, even though you can't really talk too much about it.
Contract. I mean, I'm looking at the confidentiality paragraph. I'm trying to find the expiration date on it. I can't find one, but if I find a loophole,
you and Mohammed were working on that before we recorded. And Sirach, I know you also have to run, right?
Yeah, I have to run, but I want to say thanks to David, and also, you've got a great voice, man. I don't know if you've tried to do any voiceover work for reading out your novels, but you've got the voice for it.
I've never really considered reading my own novels. They have an actor named Robert Petkoff who does most of the Star Trek novels. As for the voice, I think part of it is that I grew up listening to my father, who was a radio announcer. So
wow,
I used to love just sitting next to the radio, listening to my dad on the radio.
There it is. You nailed it, Sirach. Yeah.